Welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is military affairs, and we're going to look at fortification and trench warfare. Now, my friend and me, the friend of Panama, have talked about the modern trench warfare, and I told him, but a trench warfare is a Second World War feature, and it's not useful anymore in the modern warfare, especially if you look at the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. And he told me, but the Ukrainian soldiers are still entering the trenches, and then the Russians are submitting them under artillery fire, and the the Ukrainian soldiers die. Well, today, I said no, send me some proof, and he did send me some YouTube videos, and unfortunately those YouTube videos have now been removed. But I did look at other videos on YouTube, and unfortunately these are all like pro-Ukrainian videos, and they always allege that the Russians are entering the trenches, and then UIVs are dropping small bombs onto the Russian forces, and then the Russian soldiers die. But, well, I've said many times, who the hell knows really what's going on? If you look at the fortifications or the narrative of fortifications, it's the Ukrainian forces that have established fortifications on the contact line for the last 8 years. And the Russians basically, well, they ended the war. So who has the most trenches built? And then you have to come to the conclusions of the Ukrainians have built them. And so the question arises again, so why would the Russians then go and sit in trenches and then be bombed by the Ukrainian UIVs and artillery fire and so on, so etc. So it doesn't make to me sense, these videos, but I've been on record, as you have said many times before, that fortifications, I still want to see the fortifications are effective. And yes, we have talked about Bakhmut, and Bakhmut is now heavily fortified. And I told you many times, show me the fortifications. And just remember, I don't think that trenches are proper fortifications. And then, what did I see yesterday? I saw a video of one of my colleagues. I'm not mentioning his name because I said I will not make a video of why I disagree again. And he talks about the fortifications. And then he shows a nice map or a drawn map, like a whiteboard. He goes to the whiteboard and then he shows us a road that sort of passes, makes a curve. And on this curve, there's a lot of trenches. And now these trenches are supposed to defend the road and control the road. And these trenches are then supported by artillery fire, which cover a range of, say, 25 kilometers from that trench positions. And then you have multiple rocket launchers that again fire 40 kilometers. And these guys are placed in another different position in order to cover another area in front of these fortifications. So it's very difficult to attack these so-called fortifications, meaning the trenches. And that before the Russians, if the Russians would attack, a frontal attack, then they would be annihilated, because they now have to approach the trenches. As they approach the trenches, the rocket fire will bombard them and kill a lot of the Russian soldiers. And then when they come in a range of, say, 20-25 kilometers, then they will be bombarded by the artillery. So there'll be another point of being destruction. And as it goes basically to the front, to reach the trenches to finally, then there will be anti-tank weapons and the soldiers inside the trenches that will now fire on the advancing Russian forces, and that would be the annihilation of these attacking force. So that's basically the principle. that is being explained and what does it mean to have fortification. So in any case, so I thought to myself, okay, let's make a video about this and let's see what is the effect and what is available and what strategies can be implemented. And I will follow the same narrative. So here we have a nice map. And here you will have Bakhmut. If you can see my cursor, that is Bakhmut. Bakhmut is supposed to be highly fortified. I'm still searching for these fortifications. But in any case, then my colleague goes, and you can see here at the bottom, there are some castles. Now, these are supposed to be fortifications. You can see a couple of here. That's fairly far away from Bakhmut. There's nothing in the west of Bakhmut. Nothing there. Not much on the north side. You can see. And then you have a lot of fortifications here, far away, on the western side. You can look here at the bottom. Say 2 centimeters, 1.5 to 2 centimeters is about 2 kilometers. So call it a centimeter for a kilometer. So this is Bakhmut. So how far can an artillery piece actually fire? So if I have to fire onto Bakhmut, that is my maximum range, then I have to go about 20 to 25 centimeters to the left, and I get to Rutsia or something like that. So this is where I put my artillery in order to protect or to bombard Bakhmut. Then I have to actually place my rocket grad launchers, multiple launch rockets systems, about here off the screen to the left. That is where I have to place them. That is if I want to bombard Bakhmut. And then Bakhmut is more or less where these fortifications are at the bottom at Klishna, I believe, if I can read it correctly. Let me see. Klishivka. This is where the fortifications are. And now I will zoom in. See, this is the fortification area. So let's zoom in nicely. And there you see the road that my colleague has referred to. And you can see more or less some zigzags. That is the trenches that have been done. You can see some zigzags on this one. And here you can see some zigzags and zigzag of trenches. So this is the fortification trenches in the middle of nowhere. See, in the middle of nowhere. Not near a town, open field, protecting the road. Now, if you want to support these groups, then you have to somehow hide your artillery pieces. So you can either put your artillery pieces here in these forests and try to hide them, or here. Or you can go back a little bit here to the left-hand side, and then you will see some another forests, and that is where you can put your artillery, because at the end of the day, you have to hide your artillery. Because there are Russian UAVs flowing over these areas, and that means they can be spotted, and then they can become counter battery weapons can be put into action, and then Russian artillery can destroy that artillery, and that would be a disaster. So you don't want to really do that. So how are you're going to attack this area if you wanted to do? Because at the end of the day, oopsie, you see, there's ample space to go around these fortifications. You can go via Bakhmut and just continue on the road and so on. But just remember that if your artillery can reach those road, then you don't really need fortification, because then it is called that the road is under fire control, either by the Russians or by the Ukrainians. So any vehicle going on this road can come under artillery fire and be destroyed. So again, why would you have these trenches in the middle of nowhere, open ground? Doesn't make sense. I don't see any fortifications in the outside of these Bakhmut. So basically it has to be inside the city. And buildings and so on are fortifications on its own. And as I've stated in my previous videos, that any destruction of a building becomes a new fortification behind which enemies soldiers can hide, and basically which you have to transverse, either with a tank or something. But destruction of a building presents a good protective wall for the enemy to hide behind there. So again, so we have the fortification. I'm still looking for them. Maybe somebody else can identify it for me, because I still don't know. But let's see how you will approach this trenches. So basically what you have to do is, these are your trenches. Nice open field right in front of it. Zoom, attacking lines. You can park them there and then start attacking them, which is about 100 meters. No, it's about a kilometer away. So anti-tank weapons can still work. But in any case, a tank is not a Second World War tank anymore. It has fairly high speed. And if you want to attack them with multiple rocket launchers, that's not going to have no effect. Because it cannot destroy a tank. And even a 155 millimeter round has to basically hit a tank directly for ordering to destroy. If it falls next to it, it's not going to destroy the tank. It might disable it. So attacking these trenches with a battalion or a company of tanks is not that difficult. But again, why run the risk? Again, how would you do and fight these trenches? Now, if you look at a lot of videos about trenches that have been bombarded, you will find there's a lot of pocket holes around the trenches. But you will also find then that there are fairly all small type of blast circles. And unfortunately, it's not a 155. Here we have a nice table of the crater size that various ammunition do. You can see here the first one is a 76 mortar. The mortar flies nicely upwards, comes down nearly 90 degrees to the ground. As it hits the ground, it explodes and throws shrapnels in all directions. So the first one, we have a 76 millimeter. That can be an 80 millimeter standard mortar. It has a depth of about 500 millimeters and a width of about 1 meter. Then we can look at the 122 millimeter round. That's an artillery round. It has a depth of 700 millimeters and a size of about 3 meters. Well, that size has been increased. That it goes down to a depth of 4. Let me see. It can go a depth of about 4 meters, and it has a width of about 1.1 meter depth and 4 to 4.5 meters wide diameter around. That is an advanced type of mortar, a new type of mortar that the Russians have. And compare that against the 152 millimeter artillery round. That has a crate of about 3.5 meters in diameter and 1.2 meters deep. Now, if you watch all these videos of these trench warfare and you see those pocket marks, you see none of those holes are really that big. So these trenches didn't come under artillery fire nor under 120 millimeter mortar rounds. So what you can rather see is that they are either have been submitted to a grad type of multiple rocket launcher. But if you look at these type of ammunition and the impact, you will find that they are basically explode when they hit the ground. But they usually hit the ground at a smaller angle, not at 90 degrees, and therefore you have they're higher fragmentation. So, but the fragmentation pattern is not that effective. So again, if you look at all the pocket marks, it's a well-distributed type of pocket mark, and usually in front or in the rear of the trenches. And because the multiple rocket launchers are in any case inaccurately, they are an area weapon. I believe that most of these videos that you see were submitted to these type of ammunition. And I found them actually very ineffective. But that's not the point. Those are the standard type of weapons you would use in the Second World War. And that is more or less how trench war was attacked and so on. But now we live in a much more modern world. And forget about the precision type of ammunition. I'm not talking about that. It's a single weapon that was actually introduced by the Americans and then later on adopted by the Russians, and the Russians like that type of weapon, and they have lots of different types of them now. And that is a thermobaric type of bomb. Now, some people will call it a fuel bomb, some of them would call it a vacuum bomb, but at the end of the day, it makes a huge, huge blast area. Now, I remember in the first Gulf War, and remember in the first Gulf War, very, very little information was leaked. There are basically no photographs taken that was not approved or censored by the American Army. But there was some measurements that a huge bomb was thrown on the Iraqi trenches, the forces, and it had a signature similar to an atomic bomb. At that stage, I didn't know much about the weapons and so on, but like I do read up, and then I familiarize myself. And then later on, while the rumor was that all these Iraqi soldiers died in the trenches, and what the Americans did is they just took a bulldozer and covered those trenches and buried the fallen Iraqi soldiers in those trenches, called it like a mass grave. That is the story finally came out of the first Gulf War. But it was a mystery, and we all thought that that was a tactical nuclear weapon that the Americans used. Then later on, they attacked Afghanistan after 9/11. And I still remember that in Kandahar, if I'm the correct city, that's the one in the north, the Afghan soldiers were again in their trenches and they were shouting, and then American bombers came and they dropped the daisy cutter. I remember it very well, daisy cutters. Now the daisy cutter is, well, if you ever heard about the bomb, the mother of all bombs, well, that was the previous version, the Blue Line, I believe. And it was actually developed by the Americans in Vietnam, and it was functioned to, if helicopters had to land, they will drop this bomb into a forest and explode it, and that will make a clearing where the helicopter can land, and then they can pick up the American wounded or offload the American soldiers on that spot. And that's how it was actually first developed. But in any case, and I still remember, I wondered myself, all these Afghan soldiers and so on, and they were very brave, they were ready for the Americans, and then they were all killed. And then I read about it, and then I found out that these daisy cutters is a thermobaric type of weapon. And thermobaric weapons are the ideal weapons to clear off any soldiers in any trenches. And then it was later used on the tunnel network of Bin Laden in the mountains in Afghanistan, and there was the mother of all bombs dropped by the Americans. So it's not that the Americans does not have the technology, they were actually the initiators, and it's very successful. But like I said, the Russians liked it, and they have similar weapons at this stage. They have the Bumblebee, which was an older version, and now we have the TOS, I think it's TOS 1, something like that. And they call it the flamethrower. Now again, in the old Second World War, they used man-portable flamethrowers in order to clear trenches and pillboxes and any other fortifications. And that's how they conquered or destroyed these type of fortifications. Today, you throw a thermobaric bomb into that area and it explodes. Well, let me explain how it works. A thermobaric cell is usually filled with a fuel only. Now, fuel is usually associated with a liquid, but in this case, it's not a liquid. It's a solid piece of powder, and it's usually aluminium, magnesium, or silicon, or something like that. That is a pure that can react with oxygen. It doesn't carry its own oxygen like an artillery explosive. It takes its oxygen out of the air. And what it does also is when usually has two charges. The first charges explodes when it hits the target or approaches a proximity fuse that explodes at a certain height. That distributes the fuel, the aluminium fuel, whatever you want to call it. And then you have a secondary charge that then ignites this fuel. It's a little bit more complicated, but that's more or less the principle. And then you have this huge cloud of fuel that suddenly gets into inflame and starts the whole reaction. And the difference between that and a normal high explosive round is that the shock wave is a lot longer. It's not in terms of 1 millisecond. It goes to a couple of 100 milliseconds. And therefore, the shock front is a lot more severe. And it is the killing method is basically by the shock wave. Now, so what it does is it compresses every type of liquid cavity in your body. So it will go into your lungs and explode the bronchioli, the small bubbles in your lungs. Or if you have in your intestines, you sometimes have air bubbles. That's the ones you usually fart. And also in your eyes, stuff like that. So your eardrums burst, and these intestines burst, and these bronchioles burst, and you don't always die immediately. You can die a couple of hours later because you bleed yourself into your cavities. And you actually then suffocate in your own fluid in your lungs because you cannot breathe. And that is a sort of a delayed reaction. But it also has a high temperature front. So if you're very near to the explosives, you will burn to death. Now, unless you are in a hermetically sealed fortification bunker, you will die. So if you are in a reinforced concrete bunker, you will die. If you are in the trenches, in a foxhole, you will die. If you are not like in a enclosed area, like a tank or so, or an APC that is sealed against air pressure and so on, you will die. You might not die immediately, but you will maybe die later, depending on how far you are from the explosion. And this is the type of weapons that the Russians, you can watch it, read it actually on Wikipedia. The entries has already been entered into Wikipedia. It says that the Russians are using extensively thermobaric weapons in a Ukrainian conflict. And they also tell you, so what they do if they want to attack these trenches, they will first suppress them with artillery fire. So they bombard them with artillery. Remember, a trench is a definite coordinated position. So you can have fairly accurately fire on those positions. So what you do is you do a lot of artillery fire on them. So you suppress them. So everybody hides. Then you bring in closer your TOS, your flamethrower, which unfortunately has a maximum range of 6 kilometers. And then you bombard that trenches, and then everybody will die. Simple as that. And if you want, they also have thermobaric bombs that you can drop from aircraft. And they even have a shoulder-launched thermobaric weapon. The most knowledgeable one is the RPG-7, but we know there are a lot of upgrades and stuff like that. But typical shoulder-launched weapon. So it's not easy to really overcome it. So you can do on the one thing, you can storm over the open season and you will not kill a tank unless you have a tank killer. I know the Russians have some 152 artillery pieces, which is called the cargo one, and inside them they put little bomblets inside that are anti-armor and can penetrate about 100 millimeters of armor. So it can kill the APCs and stuff like that. But killing a tank is not that easy. So it's not too difficult. This is, for me, is no fortifications. Like I said, you can easily destroy the people in the trenches. You can easily destroy any person in bunkers, easily in any type of non-sealed off type of enclosure. And it's very, very effective inside urban areas. So the Russians have a weapon for this. That's why I say these type of fortifications mean nothing. They are not useful anymore. What is more important is maneuverability. So if I had to defend this position, firstly, I would have had duck and position for my tanks and for my APCs and my artillery pieces and my self-propelled artillery pieces by putting them in, surrounding them nicely with ground walls that you sometimes see, and then minimizing their silhouette, and therefore they are, for direct fire, they're difficult to attack, and they can still fire. And if you want a bombardment, you have to put around right inside that, how you call it, protected area. And that's the only way you're really going to kill those people inside that. If you're outside, the shrapnel will go against the ground wall, the soil, whatever. And it's basically a trench, a limited trench above ground level. That's basically what it is. And that is how I would protect and do my fortifications of my armor and my artillery pieces. But you will never put it on the front. You will have them at the back. So in order to protect yourself, or in order to do counter battery, I will always put UIVs at any time of the day, day and night in the air. So in order to see if there are any ground attack happening, advancing, and therefore what you do is you have actually, how you call it, you have two fronts, but this is no man's land. This is where you are, say, out of reach of artillery or detection. And once the one guy moves, then the other guy moves forwards and meet them in the middle, and then that is where the battle will take place. And as soon as that is it, they will withdraw again into a safe place, maneuver, whatever you want to do. And then if they want to attack at that side, then they move forward, and you basically approach them so that you are not subject to any artillery type of fire. And then you do not the enemy doesn't have concrete coordinates of your position in order to adjust their fire. And I believe that is called maneuverable warfare. Actually, was very funny. I thought this was a standard type of modern practice of creating war. And then I found out about a month ago or so, there came a report that the Russians now have moved into I can't remember what they called it. But they call it basically, they will position their artillery piece in a certain position, fire 10 shots in succession, and then quickly move away to a new position, and then fire from that position. I thought that would have been like standard practice, but it seems to me the Russians only got aware of that, or thought about that about, say, 2 months ago. But that's in any case, theoretically idea. But it works in practice. That's how you should do it. So again, what fortifications are there? I don't see any. I don't see any effectiveness. As you can see, trenches are out of the question. It's like putting a ball. Oh yeah, it's like the one video he actually shot me. No, send me. Sorry, the one's unfortunately not available anymore. I wanted to download it to show it you. It's like the trenches are like that, and at every zigzag point there's a small entry going inside, and it's like really like a foxhole. It's like they get into the ground. There's a hole in that one. You don't see the soldier. They go deep in underground. And then this one guy, a soldier, was running from one foxhole to that folder, and then was running to that folder, and it was going to folder, and then folder, and it was running around like that. And then sometimes you see a mortar falling. It's not a big explosion. It's look big because there's a lot of dust and so on. And it's like whack-a-mole, you know, this arcade game, you whack-a-mole. And that is how it got. It's what it really looked like. And you know, they did get one soldier, but they didn't get a lot of them. So, but in any case, just for the sake, this is for me not fortification, so I don't understand what the BUA is. But just for intersakes, I thought I added to this thing. So I read out about the grad system, the grad 21 system, and so on. And as you know, it's about a 40 tube multiple launch rocket system, MLRS, yeah, and so on. And it can offload about 40 seconds. They can offload all 40 rounds, and so on and so forth. It's an area weapon, very unaccurately, even repeatability. They can go between sometimes 180 meters before their target and sometimes 180 meters after their target. And this is a famous Russian weapon. It's, you know, we all heard about the Starling orals. Here you go. And here comes Crash again. So South Africa. Oh, it's a very, in my opinion, the Russian version is very ineffective because, like I said, the missile comes in like that, hits the ground, and the only shrapnel you will find is that type of area. And it would shoot up like that. It won't shoot like that. It would shoot up like that, 90 degrees. So for me, it's not a big killing area or an effective weapon. But, and here we have the South African version. Yes, we started off with the Valkyrie, and later on we sort of developed the Battalier. Valkyrie had about 20 tubes, and it was on a Unimog, but a modern version was Battalier, and that is 40 barrel on a proper truck and so loaded, and it is 127 millimeter round, and I worked on that one as well. Just for the sakes, on the propellant side. And our system is a fairly accurate system. Don't ask me why, but we did achieve a lot of accuracy on that. But more, what it is it's an air burst. That's an air burst fuse on it. Therefore, it will approach the trenches, and as it comes down into a certain height, it will explode in that height, and then explode, and it will distribute. It has a lot of fragments, bolletjies. It was like, if you look at the warhead, there was explosive inside, and it was like goons, like the ball bearings in the ball bearing, those balls. Yeah, it was like packed full of them. Like I think it's about that size. No, it can't even 600 millimeters, 500 millimeters, 600 millimeters. That's right, balls. And firstly, also takes them 5 minutes. Come in, set them up, fire all 40 tubes within 40 seconds, back up, and gone. 5 minutes max. In any case, so why they also had a range of about 40 kilometers or so, even further. And what they did is they would cover an area of 1.5 square kilometers. That is the area they would bombard. 1.5 kilometer. That is 100 meters by, I think, 150 meters. That is what they would do. And they will put 3 bolletjies, 3 ball bearings per square meter. And because they are air bursts, they have a very effective pattern of distribution. Yes, some of them are to the air, but a lot of them are actually downwards. And that's a good, very good anti-trench weapon. But that was, I just mentioned that for now, for interest sake. Because I always thought that grad systems were effective, but now that I've read up a little bit, I'm a little bit disappointed. But that's not my concern, it's not my problem. And surely they could have improved it a long time ago. So why not put on a proximity fuse? Why not improve the rotation. It's like when they have fins and so on, they are in a sort of grooves in those, and as they come out, they get a slow turn, and that's supposed to give them stability. While the South African version already had a curved type of fin, so as it was flying, by the aerodynamics, it still continued turning for the whole 40 kilometers, and that gave them stability. But in any case, so this is my story about fortifications. So next time you see videos of soldiers going into trenches, especially open trenches, like in the middle of nowhere, you have to ask yourself, is there something wrong with these people? And mostly you will find that these are maybe a section, 8 men, and they probably will be like a forward observation point. That's probably what their function is. But again, in the middle of nowhere. In forest, that's totally different. In a forest, and you want to hide yourself against impossible artillery attack, foxholes are still good. Foxholes are still good in order to protect yourself from surrounding explosions of artillery. So that's a short-lived, but it's not a fighting position. It's not a defensive position. It's just, don't sleep in the open ground. Go dig yourself a foxhole and go sleep in a foxhole. So that if you are on the list, you have at least some form of protection. Because it will be artillery, it won't be thermobaric. So next time, think about this. Like I said, I wouldn't even approach those trenches. You can look at these maps. They have a lot more roads going all the way around that. You don't need to drive this specific road. And tanks are in any case made to go over cross country. The track based. So again. In any case, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard, press the like button, press the bell button to be notified. Tell your friends, spread the word. And until next time, cheers.